My name is Wayne Brown. I'm the Vice President for IT and CIO at Excelsior College in Albany, New York. And I'm also the founder of the Center for Higher Ed CIO Studies. I've done this work since 2003. I started from my PhD dissertation. I was a CIO at the time. And the lack of a career path, the lack of definition around what a CIO should be, what they should have, all that stuff just fascinated me. So I did it for my dissertation, and I was able to keep going, and I've done it just about every year since then. So I've done the CIO research for 12 years. I started a tech leader survey in 2009. Tech leader is the person in the next layer down from the CIO, and the person most likely, I think, to become the CIO in the future. So they're the pipeline. Another term I'll define is the institution management team, or IMTs. Those are the other vice presidents and presidents. So I survey these three groups of people every year, and I gather information. They get some of the same questions, so I can compare their opinions. In 2015, I had almost 600 people respond. So over the years, I've had thousands. Sponsors, when I started Checks in 2009, I did it because I'd been paying for this out of my own pocket. And for those of you who have a spouse or significant other, you know, this is an expensive hobby and takes up a lot of time. So I was able to take sponsorships. These are the sponsors in 2015. So if you run into some of them, please thank them for helping me get the work done. Institution sponsors, these are institutions that purchased a site license for the report, and again, it helps me keep the work going. And the last group, and really the most important group, are the people who take the survey every year. So any CIOs here? Anybody who wants to be a CIO? Okay, that's usually the group. I love coming to this conference because somebody I work with says, those are your people. And that's it exactly. You're the people that I'm trying to help define what is the career path. I started this job in the mid-90s. I was in the Air Force working on an MBA with an IT emphasis, and the Air Force said, we need CIOs, and they made some signs over me, and voila, I was a CIO. So I'd never worked in an IT department. And a lot of people from my generation, first job in the IT department was the CIO. So for those of you who want to be one, you look at that career path and you say, I can't do that. You know, I've got to figure out what this career path is. So hopefully this work helps you. So the meatiest and probably the most complex part of this research is a series of 28, 29 questions that ask the CIOs and the institution management team members, what is the importance of this task versus how effective are you or how effective is the CIO at performing that task? And then I roll up 3 or 4 of those questions into, no pun intended, a role. And I think these 7 roles are where the CIO spends a lot of their time. So business partner, if you talk to a CIO or somebody who wants to be one, that's where they want to spend their time. Helping the organization with strategy, revising business processes, that's exciting stuff, right? The next one down, classic IT support provider, is putting PCs on desk and answering help desk phone. So not that the CIO does it, but providing that responsive IT department. Contract oversight, not really stuff that just makes you want to get up in the morning and run to work, right? It's pretty foundational stuff. Informatics and IT strategist, security and accuracy of institutional data, integrator, IT educators, evangelist for computer use, and the last one is profession advocate, so supporting professional organizations, actively involved, participating in national higher ed IT initiatives like Internet 2, EDUCAUSE, those kind of things. So those are the 7 roles. And this is the scale. As I said, the question, it's about 28, 29 questions long. It's divided into 2 parts. What's the importance of the task? How effective is the CIO at doing the task? And it ranges from 1, no importance, to 5, critical. And for effectiveness, expectations not met, to outstanding. And again, both the CIOs and the institution management team members get these same questions. So a pretty busy chart. I'll give you the highlights. The important thing is that if you look at IMT importance, this is the institution management team, other vice presidents and president, and the CIO rating of importance, they're in the exact same order. So that's pretty good news. So when you read the narrative about IT departments and therefore the CIO are not in alignment, they're not on the same page for the things that are important. This is a consistent result over the 12 years I've done this work. They are in alignment. They do agree on the things that are important. The bad news for CIOs and people who want to be at the table and working on meaty stuff like business partnerships is that that stuff tends to fall towards the bottom of the list. Not that it's unimportant, but when you put them in rank order, it's not as important as putting PCs on desk and getting a help desk phone answered. And the reason for that, I'm convinced, is that if you can't do those other things, if you can't do that foundational work, you're never going to get to the table. You're never going to be involved in strategic conversations if you can't take care of that foundational stuff. For effectiveness, they're not in the exact same order, but if you look, the number 1 answer for institution management team for CIO effectiveness was contract oversight. The number 1 answer for the CIO was integrator, and number 2 was classic IT support provider. Again, I think this is good news. They perceive themselves as good at the stuff that's more important, and the management team has that same perception. And again, it's not that they're not good at any of these things, it's just when you put them in rank order, they fall out that way. Any questions on this? This is really the heart and soul of the research. Nobody does anything else like this, and I think this really shoots down a lot of anecdotes about the CIO and IT departments. Yes, sir? It will, and it's also available at, and I've got this at the end of the slide, at Chex we bought a WebEx subscription last year. So if you go to chexwebex.com, in the upper right-hand corner it says recordings, and I haven't done it for this year yet, but there's probably 5 or 6 of them out there. Last year's result, the CISO result from last year, there's one on applying for the CIO job, there's one on resumes, so it's a lot of good stuff for this kind of audience. So the follow-up question to the effectiveness and importance is, are there any differences based on, pick a variable, and it's always gender, reporting to the CEO, institution management team membership for the CIO. And in 2015, there's no statistically significant difference between CIOs who are men, CIOs who are women, CIOs who report to the president, and CIOs who don't, or CIOs who serve on the management team versus CIOs who don't. In some years that I've done this, there have been differences, but in 2015 there wasn't. So some attributes, I approach these the same way. I don't come right out and ask the institution management team, is the CIO a good communicator? I ask them a series of questions, and I get a rating based on that series of questions for those 4 attributes for CIOs. So communication skills, political savvy. Political savvy I define as the ability to engage with people without ruining careers or relationships. And that's a critical skill for CIOs. IT knowledge, strategic business knowledge, and this is just a definition of them. I'll move along as I know we only have 40 minutes. So this is an example. I'll ask the institution management team members, does the CIO have the ability to speak in non-technical terms, to use business terms and examples, and to use higher ed terms and examples? And then I'll roll up those three responses, and I come up with a communication skill effectiveness rating. And this is the scale they're rated on. It was informed, not effective, to well-informed, extremely effective. And the good news is, again, scale of 1 to 5, according to the institution management team, the CIO is good at these things. The table across the bottom is, I look to see, is there a correlation between these attributes and a CIO's effectiveness, or their perceived effectiveness, according to the management team. So what that means is, as the rating for that attribute goes up, so does effectiveness, or vice versa. So good news. Interesting thing, and again, it's not that they're not good at communication skills or political savvy, but when you put them in rank order, the knowledge skills always come out at the top. I love this stuff, man, sorry. So a common question, anybody on the EDUCAUSE CIO list, the discussion list? Okay, if you want to be a CIO, you should join that. Just go out to EDUCAUSE and you can join for nothing. It's a discussion list, and there are just some really good conversations. There are some medal-hugging conversations out there, so very, very geeky conversations, and there are some conversations like this. And there's been one going on over the past couple of days about who should the CIO report to, should they be a member of the management team, and this, in my experience, this comes up about once a year. Somebody will ask, and it's like a wildfire, man, they're off and running. So I always ask this question, I've asked it since 2003, do you report to the president? 34% reported to the president in 2015, and another 63% reported one layer away. So typically it's low 30% report to the president, and about another 50% report to the provost or CFO, and they take turns being first or second. It's a very, very consistent result. So this is a chart that shows over time what the result has been. In 2003 it was 34%. In 2015, it was 34%. It's not changing. So you read a lot of stories about, I know a CIO who doesn't report to the president anymore, therefore all CIOs are going to be irrelevant. And as my good friend Ron Danielson would say, 2 anecdotes don't make data. So this is based on hundreds of responses over 12 years. It's just not changing. That blip there in 2005, I only survey community college CIOs. So they tend to be a flatter structure, and more of them report to the president. And when I look just at that population, it's very consistent over time. So this is interesting, but I can't claim there's any cause here. But just the highlight is that the CIO with a doctorate is more likely to report to the president than the CIO with a bachelor's. Seems kind of intuitive, you know, but I can't say one causes the other. And the gist of this is, to be a CIO, you have to have an advanced degree. It's not a question. You may see people from my generation who don't have one. I get a call from one of them every year. He screams into the phone, I skew the average. So you could do it then. You can't do it anymore. You can do it if you have experience as a CIO. If you don't, you have to have an advanced degree. This is institution management team membership over time. So these are the CIOs who are on the cabinet. 59% of them in 2003, 57% in 2015. So it's not changing. And again, there seems to be some relationship between advanced degree and being a member of the management team. So you can see the majority of CIOs without an advanced degree do not report or do not serve on the management team versus 64% of them with a doctorate do serve on the management team. CIO focus, this is another one that you'll read about that CIO, and this was also a conversation yesterday on the EDUCAUSE list, that CIOs are spending more time on the day-to-day and less time on the strategic. When I asked CIOs, 75% of them said over the past 3 years they spend more time on IT and department strategy. And the interesting thing, and it's another reason I love this approach to the survey, when I asked the institution management team members, they said the exact same thing. So, and they're not really connected. So I don't have a vice president for enrollment management for every CIO. They could be from different institutions. So that result's pretty interesting. And this is that focus question since 2011. It was 60% in 2015, it's 75%. So it's growing, not shrinking. So the narrative about we're going to be plumbers someday, we're all going to be working in the basement in a corner, just isn't true. Any questions? Yes?
Any correlation to if they're not, if they're in the cabinet, but they're not actually, but they're under another member of the cabinet?
Yeah, that happens, that they're at the table, but they might report to somebody else who sits there. So.
I mean, has your research shown any explanation? I mean, I guess that
No.
seems odd.
Yeah, I think it's because of the expertise that they bring. You know, that the CFO, bless their little hearts, you know, they can't talk to it. The provost can't talk to it. And if they want informed decisions made about a very expensive. Yeah, they do. They do. I've never worked for anybody other than the president. So despite what the research says, I wouldn't do it. I definitely wouldn't work for a CFO because the first question is always, how much did that cost? And it gets in the way. You know, if I had to work for somebody else, I'd work for the provost because at least you're connected to the mission. So this is a question. I'm sorry, ma'am. Did you have a question too?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, have you noticed a trend in it out between the CMO and the CIO? Because I've been reading that in the for-profit world, the CMO seems to have more power and bigger budget.
Yeah.
The CIO, is there, again, sometimes they're merging roles.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any pattern?
No, I can tell you from my experience, they're one of the most demanding customers. But I've worked in a unit where I had profit and loss responsibility, and my job hinged on that, and I get it. I understand why they're that way. So I think it's up to us to keep up with them, to find ways to keep up with them. They have a budget, you know, and you know, outside the research, I would suggest just making sure you partner with them very closely. So I asked CIOs, other than IT, what areas are you responsible for? And 65% of them in 2010 said only IT, and in 2015 it was 66%. So they're not taking over the world. There are CIOs who have responsibility for other stuff. I used to work at a big community college in Kansas. I was responsible for the police department. So I could change your password and have you arrested. But I think it's one-off stuff. It's right time, right place, or wrong place, right time. Number two and number three is always the librarian research, and it's always low numbers, so 9-10% of them. So this is the average time in the job for the CIO over time. When I started this research, CIO stood for career is over. They're going to change jobs every 3 years. Somebody told me one about any CISOs in here? Security officers? No. Somebody told me CISO stands for career is soon over. So that's interesting. 2003 it was 5.3 years. In 2015 it's 5.9 years. I think what's happening here is that since I started this work, almost 50% of CIOs predict they're going to retire in the next 10 years. Almost 50%. Despite the Great Recession and everything else, it's always high 40s, low 50% range. I think they're doing it. That's what's happening. They are retiring. Question?
Yes, so two thoughts come to mind. Number one is this is average, which suggests 50% longer than this. What is sort of the length, the higher end of
Decades.
decades?
Decades.
And then secondly, let's say someone were to leave 6 years later or fewer years, what's typically attractive with going there?
When I asked, and I don't think I have it all in this presentation, but I asked CIOs what was your last job and what was the job before that, and I asked tech leaders what was your last job and what was the job before that. I want to say it's like mid 30% of CIOs were CIOs in their last job. So if they're going on to something else, it's probably CIO, although there's I want to say it's like 10% of them say they want to be a president someday. A majority of them, it's not over 50%, but single largest answer is they want to remain in their current position. And I think that relates to 50% of them say they're going to retire. They don't want to move. They want to stay where they are and retire there.
How does that correlate with creation of CIO positions?
Yeah, I don't know. The question was, how does that correlate with the creation of CIO positions? I don't know. I can tell you that over time, the percentage, I asked for the current title. And when I first started asking that question in 2003, the number one answer was IT director. And we were all griping about, we got to be the CIO, we got to be the chief something. Chief Information Officer is now the number one answer. It's 53, 54%, something like that. I asked CIOs how old they are, and 69% of them are over 51 years old. So it kind of backs up the retirement. Yes?
Did you ask a question of how many CIOs are faculty?
I don't ask if they're part of faculty. They do have an option of answering that for their previous position. So that's a good thought, though, to ask them how many teach. I think it's really important.
I think it's increasing.
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be, the claim used to be that CIOs were coming from faculty. And, you know, anecdotes are kind of on a time delay. And I think that was an echo of the past. Right now, it's single digits come from faculty. Their last job was faculty. Yes?
Is there any difference between the state, public, and private schools?
There is. I don't know if I've looked at anything very specific or broken out all these questions by private versus public. I do well just to get through this every year. So. It's not a diverse group. It's just not. It's 8% of CIOs are minorities. It doesn't represent the people we serve, and it doesn't represent the rest of administration. And it's not changing over time. So I've asked this question for a while. It's consistently a really low percentage. Gender is the same way. 26% in 2008, 25% in 2015 were women. It's better than industry. In industry, it's mid-teens. And it looks like, you know, I say it's improving, and I get some people say, what are you talking about? Well, it had been on a pretty steady decline, and it started improving. But I'll go over some reasons why I think it's going to continue to go down. I think we've got some challenges here, and this is one of them. If you look at that blue bar, that's the percentage of women who are 51 to 55 versus men, 41% versus 30%. When you look at those over 51 years old, 1% more of the men are older than 51, but women retire younger. It's, and that's not a general statement. In this research, women are projecting they're going to retire younger. And not as many of them want to be CIOs, and there are not as many, the tech leaders, that next layer down, there are not as many of them who are women. Yes, sir?
You said it's not diverse. Isn't that exactly what President diversity in this country? Also, does it feel it's a political position more than a technical position?
Yeah, I don't know. It's too deep for this. Yeah. Next survey. So this looks like a train wreck, but this is what I just told you. So, and it kind of is a train wreck. So the top line is the percentage of women who say they're going to retire in the next 10 years who are CIOs. So 52% of them versus 47% of the men. The next line down is the percentage of tech leaders who are women. So that's this group, the next layer down. And then the third one is the percentage of, what is that one? Oh, okay, that's female tech leaders who have a CIO interest. So I asked the tech leaders, do you want to be a CIO? Only 25% of them are women. And that's down from 31% last year. And then the bottom line is percentage of CIOs who are women. Tech leader career plans, I asked them, do you want to be a CIO? When I first started this work, my guess would have been that the percentage was going to be low because everybody who reported to me was lying when I asked them if they wanted to be CIOs. So I think the good news is that people are starting to own it, and they do want to be one, and they're trying to figure out how to get there. So 66%, it's not great, but I think it's enough to fill the pipeline. So the next question is, what are they doing to get ready? 34% of them are engaged in on-the-job training. That's the number one answer. 32% of them are being mentored by a CIO or another executive. The good news is that's the number one and number two way to get ready according to CIOs. Then I asked the tech leader, who's mentoring you? 53% of them say my CIO. Number two answer is no one, tied with CIO from another institution. And that's been a problem over the years that I've done this work is that's the number one and number two answer is my CIO or no one. And if we say one of the best ways to get ready is to have a mentor and you don't have anyone mentoring you, I think that's going to be a problem. This is over time tech leaders who said they had a CIO mentor. It was 36% when I started this work, 53% in 2015. So that's awesome. It's better than the alternative, but it's still only 53%. And again, I get this two-view perspective on these questions. I asked CIOs, are you mentoring someone? 53% of them said yes. You know, I did 20 years in the Air Force, so it kind of colors my view of a lot of stuff, but I think this is our job. I think this is part of a CIO's job is to mentor the next generation. Yes?
The background, is it mostly like business background,
For a degree major?
no, what's I know in general? At least one degree, the first degree.
Yeah. The degree for the highest level, the number, there's 4 or 5 top answers. I don't know if I go into it in this one or not. Technology, business, education, and leadership administration tend to make up 75% of the degree majors. Mentored tech leader activities. So these are, what are you doing? Regular meetings with the mentor and on-the-job training, number 1 and number 2 answer. That's fantastic. Number 3 is no activities at this time. So if you have a mentor and you're not doing anything, I would say you probably don't have a mentor. And this is a view over time for the number 1 and number 2 answer, the tech leaders who were engaged versus no activity. And you can see in 2010, no activity was the number one answer. And in 2012, 2013, they were tied. But it's dropped significantly. So I think this is good news, but there's still work to do. My wife did this slide, so part of working for a nonprofit is I put my wife to work. So she looked at what was the named activity, so that's the blue one, versus what are they actually doing is the green one. So 89% said mentoring's the way to get ready. Only 53% are mentoring somebody. On the job training, 73% said that's the way to get ready, and 55% provide that opportunity. Any questions?
I do not get the difference between mentoring and training.
I think mentoring is more personal, and I do think that, I think you hit on the part of the problem with mentoring is, what's the definition of it, and how do I do it, and it's a very personal thing. And I talk to a lot of people in your positions, and there are some of them that I think are going to do fantastic, and it would be great, but I don't think I could mentor them. You know, there's just not that connection there. So I do think it's a very personal thing. Versus training is, here's this project, shadow this person on this project. You know, it's like that kind of on-the-job training approach to it. Yes, sir?
Much of what you're speaking towards is somebody internal becoming CIO. What's the percentage of people coming from external sources?
You know, surprisingly, I would have guessed that internal candidates didn't have a chance, but it's close to 50% of CIOs were internal candidates for the job. So surprisingly, it's pretty high. I asked, what degree should a CIO have? The gold bar are the institution management team members. I would say those are the people writing the job description, doing the hiring, and in many cases supervising CIOs. 90% of them say you have to have an advanced degree. I think debate over. You got to have one. And then the other two, purple is CIO at 84 and tech leader 82. So there's a lot of agreement around this. And then what major should they have? This is a problem. 55% of the institution management team members say you should have a technology major. And the number one answer for CIOs is the major is not important. So I think it's a little bit of this is semantics, and that institution management team member definition of technology and your definition of technology are two very, very different things. Yes.
I think it has to do also with the age group and them actually having tech degrees. I mean, people are coming from different backgrounds because of age versus.
Yeah, I'd agree that my generation and the generation just before mine, a lot of them did not have technology. There wasn't a technology major available. And they tended to come from a discipline, so they were faculty. And they just happened to be working with computers, and somebody said, well, you understand this stuff, so you should be the CIO. I did my MBA in '96, and I have an IT emphasis. So I think you could get it at the time, but they tend to come from other places too. The challenge with this is they're doing the hiring, so that makes it important. This is the actual degree, CIOs with an advanced degree over time. 79% of them had one in 2015 versus 82% in 2003. So it's pretty steady.
Higher means master's and PhD.
Yeah, advanced is a master's or a terminal degree. So there are veterinarians in this group. There are PhDs, EDDs, lawyers. I give a list of 19 skills, and I allow write-ins, and I ask, what are the 5 most important skills for a CIO to have? The tech leaders and the CIOs give the same number 1 and number 2 answer in reverse order, and very consistent result over time is communication and leadership. IR1 and I'd agree. I think those are 2 very important skills. The number 1 answer, according to the management team members, is technical knowledge. So Again, it could be semantics. I said this to a group the other day, that if you read a CIO job description and it says you should have a Cisco certification, I would run like the wind, because you're not going to be a CIO if you're in the closet. The other thing interesting here is that between the number 1 and number 2 answer, there's a drop of about 30%. And it's, again, very consistent results over time. And I think that comes from, it takes a lot of skills to do this job. There's a lot of stuff you got to know. And I'm going to have to speed it up. Previous positions, 34% of them were CIOs, executive directors, systems directors, AVPs. The good news is top 17 or 18 answers were IT department positions. So the career path is through the IT department. It isn't being a consultant or being something else. It's working in an IT department. Last industry, I asked them, in your last job, what industry did you work in? 76% of them worked in higher ed. So this narrative about they're coming from industry to take our jobs, like they'd want to give up that pay for this pay. I think the rush is over. It's already occurred. You will find 1 or 2 examples. Somebody will say, I just came from industry. But remember what Ron said, 2 anecdotes don't make data. And this is a comparison between the 5 different sectors and some interesting questions. The ones I'd point out are that higher ed CIOs tend to have an advanced degree, commercial do not. More of the commercial CIOs were male versus female. Their retirement plans are exactly the same. So when you ask them what percentage you're going to retire in the next 10 years, they're the same. More of the commercial CIOs served on the management team and reported to the president than the higher ed CIOs. Do you have a question, sir?
Yeah, did the survey also ask them about their focus? Was it more academic technology or was it more enterprise technology?
No, I don't get into that. Yeah, I tend to keep it about the person. So Casey Green does some of that stuff, EDUCAUSE does some of it, but I tend to focus on this group, the tech leaders as people, and the CIOs as people. So it's their background, skills, that kind of stuff. This is retirement plan, so 48% of them are going to go in the next 10 years. That's what they say, and I think that's what they're doing. Retirement plans by gender, again, women go sooner. So it's 52% versus 47% in the next 10 years. Tech leader retirement plans, good news. Well, good news for us, maybe not for you. You don't have the same plan, so it's 32% say they're going to go in the next 10 years. And that group that says they're going to go also will say they're not interested in the job, in the CIO job. So conclusions, I do think there's alignment. I think we've got gender problems and race problems. I think we need to do some things to fix that balance. Even though mentoring has improved, I think there's lots of work to do, and if we say it's the number one way to get ready, I think we need to get after it. Lots of anecdotes, I love them, but they tend not to be true. Next steps. Reports are available at checks.org, so purchasing reports help us keep the research going. I don't take a salary. My wife doesn't take a salary. Anything that's left over, we put into endowed scholarships. We have 4 of them right now at 4 different institutions, 4 people in the next layer down. Webinars is the address for those. Again, it's in the upper right-hand corner. It's kind of hidden, but it says recordings. The CISO survey, so last year I started doing a survey of Chief Information Security Officers, and I sent a second surveys to CIOs asking them some of the same questions, because I think CISOs look a lot like CIOs did 10 or 15 years ago. No career path, what education should they have certifications, a lot of the same questions. So I started that research, and I just launched it on Monday, so it went out to CISOs and CIOs. I'll start the sponsorships this month, and then surveys will go again in February of 2016. So if I don't spam you in January or February, send me your email address, and I'll send you a survey. Any other questions? Yes?
Is it not the flat on the salaries, like what you are asking? If you can cancel them somewhere else, but
Yeah.
the thing is that let's get to the second question. What is the major reasons for CIOs to change their position?
Yeah, good question. So first one was about salary. It is in the report. I asked CIOs and I asked tech leaders, what's your salary? Interesting result. Who makes more money, men or women? Exactly. Female CIOs in 2015, 2014 made $11,000 more per year than men. And in 2013, it was $5,500 more. So I thought that was interesting. Tech leaders, I ask for a range, or I have in the past. I'm going to start asking for a specific number next year. And the second question was, I'm sorry.
Changing positions, the reasons.
Oh, okay. Second question was, what's the reason for changing positions? The number one answer for tech leaders for why do you want to be a CIO is I want to make a difference. The number one answer why they don't want to be a CIO is that, as my son would say, it's too political. I don't know what that means. I think that's probably, it's like mentoring. I think there's lots of definitions for it. But for those of you who are thinking about it or you're on the fence, it is a great job. I love it. I've done a lot of great jobs, and this is one of the best. You can have such an impact on the institution. Yes, sir.
See maybe a third position emerging that's more CTO, CIO in my experience. It's almost the industry needs like a CTO with more of the emerging technologies, iOS, Android, more integration,
Yeah.
more for development.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So probably 5 years ago, the story was that CIOs were going to be replaced by CTOs, and it just hasn't happened. That single-digit percentages who are CTOs. And now I heard this on Monday. What about chief digital officers? What I've seen and heard about, and in both cases. I think this was the backstory, is that they've got CIOs who aren't doing a good job, and they're going to end up being a bummer. So for chief digital officer, they want somebody who can move the business forward and help the business and blah, 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 blah. That tells me the CIO is not doing that work. And I'd say that's a different problem than creating another position. Yes, sir.
We talk about CIO as a person, but it's as a team. So right now, I'm sure you have a chief security officer.
I do.
So as far as the CIO as a team, what do you see as that team going? You have a security officer, maybe you have an innovation officer.
Yeah.
Innovation, maybe you have an academic. Are you seeing the role to be a leader of leaders within IT or within that landscape?
Yeah, I think they should be. I think we get into problems, though, if we start, you can delegate, but really you're always, as a leader, you're always going to own the responsibility for something. And I think when we create a CTO and say, you just handle all this technology stuff, I think that's a bad path. I think you're going to get caught unawares and going to get relegated, or your department will get relegated. I think as somebody said earlier, you got to be in there with the provost. You got to be in there with the mission. Yes, sir.
Yes, I was wondering if you included VP of IT in CIO statistics. And if so, why did you or why did you not?
Yeah, I ask for their title. And so I ask, is it VP for IT, CIO, whatever. Executive director is another popular one. But I always ask, is CIO included? And the reason I focus on that is there was such a long period of time where we said, we've got to have that title. So I wanted to track what it is. But I do report on VP and AVPs or whatever they are. Sir, question? Let's see. I think the quickest way to get there is start over. Let me see. Are there any other questions while I'm doing this? Yes.
My previous question is why CIOs change their position out?
Oh, why do they go someplace else? Yeah, I don't ask that. The question was, why do CIOs change jobs? Yeah. I would assume it's for advancement, or they recognize the end is near. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is this a-
being a smaller institution, I would say our CIOs have left to keep stepping up to
Yeah.
larger institutions.
Yeah, it's one of the top answers is, when I ask CIOs, what do you want to be? CIO is one of the top answers, CIO in another institution. And I'm sorry, I'm getting the hook here. Thank you all for your time. I really do appreciate it. Have a good day.